Hey Zwifters, I'm Simon Schofield and this is the Zwiftcast. Coming up on this episode, what type of Zwifter are you? Masters racing on Zwift. Fast but friendly. Academy graduates Leah races the Giro Rosa. And, of course, Le Tour. Our take on the best 3 weeks of the year. Well, here we are again, fellas, back on our home turf, but it's July, so the eyes of the cycling world are not on Yorkshire, Melbourne or Michigan, but on France. I absolutely love the Tour, and I'm going to be rooted to every single stage, and we are going to reflect that in this Zwiftcast, and more of that coming up later. But let's say hello properly to les autres Zwiftcasteurs. Bonjour, and yo dude, Nathan Guerra.
Hey, how's it going, Simon?
It's going very French. And salut and g'day, mate, Shane Miller.
Good evening, guys. I've got my elbows clearly tucked in beside me, and they won't be flying out in any part of this Zwiftcast tonight.
I'm very pleased to hear that. It's been, that's been discussed and discussed to death. And by the time this podcast comes out, it will be, it really will be history, and there'll be another drama to concentrate on. But can I just say for the record, I loved Sagan before this incident, and I still love Sagan after this incident, much as I like Cav, and I think he's been really hard done by. But there we go. Nathan, have you recovered from your Icelandic epic? I mean, you went almost dark actually on social media for a little time. Was there a big recovery period?
There still is, yeah. I'm surprised at how much it has zapped me in a way that I've never experienced before.
What do you think killed you so much? Just I mean, obviously you've got travel, you've got no sleep for more than 2 days. You've got on and off hard, intense efforts. I mean, do you think it was just a cumulative thing? That I'm assuming it's basically fatigue you're suffering from.
There's so many systems that come together to keep the body energized, and you tax them all when you lack sleep. Do FTP tests over and over again while lacking sleep, and then are just consuming as many calories you can in whatever form that you can. Rather than high nutrition density. So I think those things all kind of came together. This is the first, I've done some endurance stuff in the past, 6 to 12 hour races. This was well beyond that kind of a time zone push.
Shane, what's the very tiredest you've ever been as a result of cycling?
Probably a similar event to what Nathan did. I was doing a 24-hour mountain bike event, but you'd go out and they're about an hour lap. And we had a team of 6 of us, and there was a scheduling stuff up in the middle of the night. So I thought, oh, great, I'm going to get 4 hours sleep. Excellent. I'll jump in the car and on the back seat and have 4 hours sleep. And getting woken up at 3:15 a.m., someone banging on the car door saying, there's been a schedule stuff up. Shane, ride. And I remember waking up and having to get on the bike and being so tired. I had a small amount of rest, but I felt sick. That's you can't feel your legs. Everything hurts. I chugged a Red Bull, and the next thing I know, I'm at 190 heart rate in the middle of the forest at 3:30 a.m. and it's a good memory looking back on it. At the time, I'm like, what the hell are we doing? It's probably my horror story.
I've never done one of these 24-hour things or anything that requires long periods of lots of sleep. I don't think I could actually. I mean, I did the Transalp race, which I wasn't competitive in. I mean, my entry into that was on the basis of I really hope I don't come last. That was my expectation for that. But that was 7 mountain stages on the bounce. And the weird thing about that was I had one bad day, but the bad day was in the middle. And towards the end, I actually think I rode myself into it a bit. But the elation of actually thinking I'm actually going to finish this thing, which at one point I thought I wasn't going to finish, took over, and I finished elated rather than tired, which was quite curious, really. Shane, it's leaked out. Well, it didn't leak out, actually. Elite were pretty deliberate in putting it out. But new trainer launched in the way things are these days, launched with kind of, almost bogus, spoofy spy pictures of a new trainer. And let's just deal with the name first. Let me just say, I really like Elite as a company. I think they're a great company. They're great people, really friendly, really good at what they do, apart from when it comes to naming trainers. I mean, okay, let's have a go at this one. It could be Direto, it could be Direto, and of course it's immediately become Dorrito, as in the chili flavoured chips crisps.
We've adopted that, yes.
Yeah. Well, so let's just stick with that. So let's talk about the Dorrito and wonder why it is that Elite are so ambiguous in their choice of the way things can be pronounced. Maybe it's deliberate. Who knows? Maybe it's deliberate. Like, this goes back to my theory that the sales and marketing guy there is called Peter Lago, or could be Lego, Lago. So maybe he just likes ambiguous sounding names like his own. I don't know. But anyway, you've had a little bit of time with it. Really interesting bit of kits. Two things I think that immediately stood out for me were, one, pricing, which you can talk about, and two, accuracy. So here we have what appears to be a very good value trainer, which is highly, highly, highly accurate. That looks as though it's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think Elite have really stepped up, and I was really happy to receive a pre-production unit, because the llama testing is now been industry standard. So we have one about 6 to 8 weeks prior to them actually hitting the shelf and going through the final production units. So I have to preface everything I say with, it's not the final. So we may see something different hit the shelf, but we've been given a unit which will be very close to the final. But we've all had a bit of fun with it. Well, the first thing I did is I put it through my flux testing protocol. Look, the claims are 2.5% power accuracy. Now, what that means is it could be spot on, or it could be plus 2.5 or minus 2.5. But I've got a unit that tracks perfectly with my P1 power pedals, and they're known to be pretty good. This unit is just brilliant for the power reporting. So the unit that I have, the pre-production, looks really, really good. Response time, the ride feel is pretty good, and the price point too. I think this is going direct up against the Flux. So interesting stuff.
The kind of almost universal opinion from the early and well-respected testers who've got it is that they've really got this right. What we learned, I think, from last year is, okay, can you get it right, and then can you get it out in the right numbers, at the right time? I mean, it strikes me Elite are a bit better at doing that, or have got a slightly better track record of doing that than Tax have. And when you looked at the Flux last year, it always looked kind of behind the pace. Your suspicion was always, I'd be really surprised if this is available by Christmas, despite what the company was saying. Elite look as though they may not fall into that trap, but I mean, who knows whether they can ramp up production, but they look ahead of the game, not behind the curve at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. And look, this is the first move we've seen in the game of chess of, the marketing and new products coming out to the field. This is well before Eurobike. We're expecting maybe a few announcements at Eurobike, maybe a few refinements at Eurobike. We're not sure, but they've come out, they've announced it now. They've put it out in the field, out very limited in the field for people who we can talk about it. Really interesting move by Elite. And I guess it's now, we'll sit back and wait to see what the other companies do.
We'll talk about Eurobike later, actually, Shane. But I do wonder what we're going to see there this year. I wonder if it's going to be as big as it was last year for trainer announcements.
I think we might see a little bit of a settling down in brand new, new trainers. I think we'll see a refinement and a perfection of what they've currently got. Now, from what I've seen of the Dorrito so far, it's nothing new and revolutionary, but they've got a good road feel. It's got good accuracy. It's a nice setup unit. So I think they're just refining and perfecting, what's currently out there. But either if it's not this year, then next year's going to be huge. There's going to have to be some big shakeups in this market to keep people buying things and to keep people active in the indoor space. So we'll see. Not quite sure it'll be this year, but we'll be hanging around for a few years on this topic, I think.
My question is whether or not there's going to be broadcasting at Eurobike, and then I think there'll probably be an interest in.
The bandwidth is
there.
Horrible. The bandwidth is horrible there. Oh, no, it really is. We struggled. Even Ray last year had about 20 different phones there trying to upload things in his little caravan.
Yeah, I mean, they must sort the bandwidth because you can't have an exhibition of that nature and that scale these days without expecting people to be wanting to live stream. I mean, I think people last year, to be honest, were struggling to upload a JPEG, let alone stream, let alone stream live. It was shockingly bad on site.
I guess for the media who were there to cover the new things as well, the new launches, yeah, for sure. We've got to get this stuff out ASAP. These days, people want 0 day, 0 second on the ground stuff straight away. So, look, we'll be there and we'll be bringing everyone as much as we can. It's going to be a lot of fun.
This is the Zwiftcast, the podcast for Zwifters.
Okay, let's have our first feature of this episode, and this has arisen from your neck of the woods, actually, Shane, a guy in Melbourne who runs a website who came up with a really interesting and quite amusing way of categorising different Zwifters. So I talked to him about it. Here it is. Welcome to the Zwiftcast to an Australian, Mike Boudrie. Hi, Mike.
Hi, how's it going?
Not bad. Now, the reason I got you on, actually, is because you've come up with a really interesting thing on your website, La Velocita. Just first of all, just tell me a little bit about the site.
While it is a cycling website, I think it's more a website about people that ride bikes and everything that they like that's associated with riding. That's sort of where this article's come from a little bit.
I'm going to call it a taxonomy of Zwifters. You categorised types of Zwifters. So what I'd like to do, Mike, really is just briefly go through these types that you identified, and I'm sure listeners will be automatically associating themselves perhaps with a particular type. Let's start with your first category, which is the diehard.
This is what many Zwifters probably aspire to be, or maybe don't aspire to be, but suddenly find themselves there after getting really into it. A Wahoo or Tax or whatever other type of choice trainer you have, it's going to definitely be the most expensive one possible. It's likely that you'll have a ginormous TV that is dedicated to Zwift, very fast and expensive road bike attached to your setup. It very, very rarely leaves the trainer or the house. They're someone that no longer really needs jerseys in their cycling collection because they're more often than not just with the nicks on.
Now, there was one aspect of the diehard I found particularly interesting: triathletes. You better tell me about that.
Zwift seems like a perfect place for them to add to their just repertoire of never-ending statistics that it seems to be able to pump out for you. They might be people that are particularly susceptible to this.
Well, I am going to express no view whatever about triathletes. Let's just draw a veil over that one there. Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on to your second type in the taxonomy of Zwifters, and that's the secret Zwifter.
I mean, these are all sort of from my personal experience. I have a morning group of about 30 or 40 people that I ride with most mornings of the week, and I just sort of observed that some were having these just massive gains in performance with very little explanation, and I just couldn't quite work out why I was having to seem to work harder and harder to hang on to their wheels. And sort of I just began to notice just little things slipping out in their social media, the photo of their lounge room, and you could just sort of see a bit of a bike sort of hidden in the corner, sort of set up on some sort of trainer, and they were very, very quiet about it when you sort of spoke to them on the road.
One of the characteristics you outlined of the secret Zwifter, which I thought was funny, was salt marks close to their TV.
It's sort of the incriminating evidence, isn't it, more than anything else? It's just sort of something that you'd see on a crime program that lick the carpet and go, something's been going on here.
Yeah. I know a few, let me tell you. I might expose them one day. Moving on to the third group, which I think is possibly slightly related. This is the denier. So this is people who openly proclaim their dislike of stationary trainers.
Yeah, but invest in one and go the whole hog. I hate to say it, but this is probably where I'm finding myself sitting right now. It's not a dislike of Zwift or training, or I think just I've always found it incredibly boring, and I've had this sort of preconceived idea that I won't like sitting on a trainer until I actually do. And then I enjoy it for the time that I'm riding, and then after it, I think I'm not sure if I did enjoy that, and then up to when I do it again, so I don't know why I'm doing this, and then I enjoy it again.
It's interesting, that one, isn't it? I mean, are you a denier to yourself or a denier to the outside world? I guess a denier to the outside world would make you a secret Zwifter, whereas a denier to yourself is probably the pure denier.
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I suppose the denier and the secret Zwifter can definitely work together. Your last
one, you called the true Zwifter / the non-cyclist. Now, I think this is the most subtle one, Mike. So, explain the characteristics of this group.
I think to call them probably the non-cyclist is a little bit unfair, but this is someone that spends the vast majority of their time riding their bike on Zwift and a very small percentage actually out on the roads. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just an observation. I think it's sort of spawning a whole new subcategory of cycling, sort of a new discipline almost, which I think is really quite interesting. And I sort of jokingly said in the article that I think we'll see Zwift races televised, and I think someone commented, well, they already are. And the events that I've been to at cycle clubs and things around the place where they've set up 4 or 5 Zwift bikes and had competitions going, it's certainly a brilliant way of watching cycling and having a great time.
Those of us who've taken an unhealthy interest in the development of Zwift have seen that, as you said, really, almost a completely new category of cycling, which is people who completely renounce the outdoors and all the things we associate with cycling, but they're still cyclists in a way because they're moving their feet and legs in a way that turns pedals. It is interesting to see how that's going to develop. So those are your 4 groups. I will ask you the question. You remain, you think, a denier. Is that right?
I'm definitely guilty of secret training. I love getting on Zwift at the right times, and I think it's an absolutely amazing tool. And as someone who came into it sort of with a bit of a preconceived idea that I'm not sure I'm going to like this because I like riding my bike outside so much, I am a bit in denial of how much I actually enjoy it. The moment for me was when I was on group ride or a race and I was riding, and I suddenly had that moment when I was leaning as I was going into the corners, and I thought, I'm there.
Well, listen, it's a very amusing list. It's been very entertaining to talk to you about it, and I think there's many a true word within that article, and I'm sure any Zwifter who reads it would, there's certainly going to be elements of self-recognition going on. Thanks very much for explaining it to us here on the Zwiftcast. Pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks very much, Simon. Pleasure.
Ride on!
And just a quick reminder, Mike's website is La Velocita, LAVELOCITA.cc. Well, clearly, guys, none of us can say we're secret Zwifters. I think probably the rest of the world has got us pretty much nailed as die-hard Zwifters. I think it'd be tough to suggest we're anything else. Shane, out of those categories, which one do you think is the biggest?
Oh, look, I could go through my stats, I guess, and my analytics, and so I know it's the casual Zwifter who just jumps on every now and then. So it's sort of the, crams in the time. I'd like to believe it's the hardcore Zwifter is the biggest, because that's what I am, and that's what my circle of people are. We're all hardcore Zwifters, aren't we?
But Nathan, I think you said this before, and a couple of people at the company during all those interviews I did with Zwift Insiders kind of hinted at this. The very biggest group of Zwifters may not be the diehards and the hardcores. It may just be people who are jumping on and kind of cruising around at 1.5 or under 2 watts a kilo, and are doing it for fitness, not in that kind of obsessive way that some others do.
This is a tough one. I love the article. Okay, it's a great article, but I think it mixes a lot of things up in categories. And I find myself, the diehard, but then I see some things within the diehard description that I'm kind of like, I don't really jive with that at all, actually. Like, I feel like I'm this totally other category that wouldn't necessarily call a diehard. It's it's something I use on a daily basis, but it's almost that I'm really passionate about at times, but then at other times it's in the background. And I like the digital Zwift. I've become the Tron Zwift. I don't know, like I'm in Zwift. I don't know what to call myself. And I think that's the pull from it, is that there's a little bit of a truth that stings us a little bit about it and a laugh to have with it. So.
Exactly, yeah. Salt marks near the TV was the one that got me, actually, as I said in that piece. Okay, listen, fellas, we can put it off no longer. Let's talk about the tour. I mean, I know it's not Zwifty, but, you know, everybody loves the tour. Me in particular. It's just, for me, it's the best 3 weeks of the year. It's fantastic. Never without drama, French countryside, pictures, you know, lots of cycling chat. I just love the tour. I love the tour. And I thought actually it would be just really interesting, seeing as we are where we are, Shane in Australia and you over in the States, just to kind of give the listeners a bit of an insight into how the tour is covered in our respective countries and maybe how we watch it. I mean, I must say, here in the UK, we are completely spoiled. We've got a choice of 2 broadcasters, each of which will give the whole stage in its entirety, you know, from the départ fictif. I mean, we're even getting the rollout now and Christian dropping his flag every single day. Now, the interesting thing about that is that's an ASO decision. This is the first time ever, as far as I can establish, that the tour has been covered every stage right from the start. And when you look at it, you do wonder why that's not happened in the past. But anyway, so we've got 2 broadcasters, Eurosport, which is a pay service, and there's a free-to-air service called ITV4. I'll state my preference right here, which at the moment, despite the fact that I watch Eurosport a lot, I watched all the Giro on Eurosport, I'll watch most of the classics on Eurosport. I wouldn't touch Eurosport with a barge pole with an extension on it for their tour coverage, because I cannot abide the commentator. Carlton Kirby. I mean, I really shouldn't get going on this because I can get quite passionate, but he takes roughly 1.3 microseconds to get so far under my skin that I want to beat myself with some kind of
Carlton Kirby now.
You know,
what is
bunch of sticks or something. He's just awful. I mean, anyway, don't get me going. Just do not get me going. I mean, he doesn't know anything about cycling. He gets the vocabulary wrong. He makes terrible jokes. I mean, anyway. I've said enough. In a public place, I've said enough. He's blocked me on Twitter, actually. Not that I said... No, he has, actually. Well, he routinely blocks anybody who says he's not the best commentator in the world. He routinely blocks them on Twitter. So, yeah, not that you're sensitive or anything, Carlton. But anyway, the commentary on ITV4 has Ned Boulting and David Miller, the ex-rider. And I have to say, they're terrific together. Really, really, really good together. They've only just replaced Phil and Paul, who were doing the commentary in the UK up until not this tour, but the tour before. And even though there were a couple of kind of protests about where are Phil and Paul last year, Ned and David Miller have stepped into their shoes, and I think are doing an absolutely terrific job. Really, really, really good job. There's been a bit of... Shane, let's talk about Australia, but I think segueing into that, your main broadcaster...
Phil and Paul have been out the back for a while now. Well, last year they were only doing the last 50 Ks, I think, or the last hour or two. We had both Matthew Keenan and Robbie McEwen, the green jersey winning Robbie McEwen, on there doing a sort of a co-commentary, and it was brilliant. Matthew Keenan is an Aussie, so he mispronounces everything like a true Aussie, which is brilliant. We understand him completely. But he is brilliant. His cycling knowledge is amazing. And then you've got Robbie sort of biting at his heels all the time from the racer perspective, from the fighter perspective. You can tell Robbie's an ex-sprinter, so just the way he comes across is knowledgeable in what's happening in the race, and it's competitive, his commentary in what's going on. He has a real understanding. So those two guys are now doing the full full coverage that we're getting with SBS, our national broadcaster here, and SBS are doing a brilliant job. We're getting a lot of the stages in full.
Yeah.
So last night we saw Tommy Vauclair taking off from the front, trying to get in the break, and then pouring stuff all over his face and being Tommy Vauclair. So we saw that from the start. We saw it being established, and that's a real brilliant part of the sport that as a racer, you are part of, establishing a break or getting into the early breakaways and things like that. But as a viewer, you never really see that. So it's really good to be exposed to all of that. So our coverage is brilliant. We are loving it.
So that's on your free-to-air national broadcaster.
Yeah, it is. Yep. SBS, who are also doing, they do a lot of on the web stuff as well. They're doing a podcast, I think, which is even sponsored by Zwift. They're doing, there's just extra content all the time. There's replays all throughout the day. I think there's about 4 replays throughout the day. So you turn on SBS, which have multiple channels now as well here with our digital service. And it's just tour fever. We are absolutely loving it. The Aussies just soak it up. And look, if you can cut this between, now and the finish, it's been great to see Richie Port win. Or hang on, let's re-record that. Richie Port was robbed. Richie Port was he should have won the tour. Or
well,
so with either of those.
The reason I wanted to talk actually about coverage is that in this forum it's really difficult to talk about who's ahead and who's behind and who looks good and who doesn't. What time of day does it occur for you if you want to watch it live, Shane?
There's the problem. We are on the other side of the world, both on the other side and underneath. So it's cold here. Racing starts, if it's live, it's about 8:30 p.m. and finishes at about 2 a.m.
Okay.
And so that's in Melbourne time, but Australia's a big place. So Australia has the other side of Australia, known as Western Australia, which is in a better time zone. It's 2 hours behind, which is 2 hours closer to the tour. And we have tickets booked to Perth for next week. So we're going to there for a week and a half to Perth so we can watch the tour, which starts at about 7:30 at night and finishes at about 11:30 at night. Much better times to watch things. And it's a bit more sunnier in Perth this time of year as well.
Yeah, but basically you're pretty well served. It's easy to access. You've got good commentators. Yes. You've got extensive coverage. I get the sense, Nathan, that in America, and obviously America's a huge place with an awful lot of media, but for the average cycling fan, that the tour's not quite so easy to access. Am I right or wrong about that?
A while ago, it used to be that way. NBC's done a pretty good job of picking up coverage multiple times a day throughout the day. You have to go online if you want to get really into something that's not completely prepackaged for you in ways that you're missing things and getting lots of commercials involved in ways that you're like, well, why did that get cut here or there and whatever may be happening. So the access is a little bit trickier, but for me, it's extremely tricky. We are philosophically cable cutters, like to the point that I will have a conversation with someone trying to sell me cable about why, in the big scheme of things, no one should ever buy it and invest in it any longer, and how we're all being ripped off by the man.
Yeah, but that's quite common in the States, isn't it? Actually, I think we call you guys cord cutters, cable cutters. But this is, cable previously has had a pretty dominant position as the not free to air stuff, and that is being challenged, I think, by what people call cord cutting. But let's just talk about NBC's coverage. So is that's very, very chopped up and prepackaged? They would never do anything like stick 2 commentators on to talk about 189 men riding through the French countryside and let it go and maybe throw in an advert every 20 minutes or so.
Much more like watching the Super Bowl for sure. You get a lot of commercial content coming through, continually interrupting the action. It is Phil and Paul mostly, and then they do bring in Bob is in there. Bob Roll's in there as well. I usually do buy a pass. I sent an email 2 days ago saying I'm not buying a pass today. We could talk about why, but
I am a highly selective consumer of media, except when it comes to the tour. When I will just kind of almost drop everything to watch it. For me, it just really is the best 3 weeks of the year. It's just it never fails to produce amazing drama. There's another Grand Tour going on which has not been without drama, and particularly for Zwifters, and particularly for Zwifters who followed the story of Leah Thorvilson, the winner of the Zwift Academy. Now, she started the women's Giro Rosa event, which is pretty much the flagship event, I think, in women's bike racing. It's 9 stages, I believe. I was going to say it's the women's equivalent of the Tour. It's not quite that, but it's not far off. And it was Leah's first World Tour level race. And it was a massive honour for her to be selected for the Canyon SRAM team. And I know there's a massive wellspring of support behind Leah, particularly from me. I having been quite close to the story, quite close to Leah, seen some of the stuff behind the scenes, which I've actually not reported on that she's had to deal with. I'm going to put my cards on the table. I'm a big supporter of Leah. I think what she's gone through is incredible in terms of kind of opposition and even hostility from places you might not have expected it. But anyway, she started obviously with some trepidation, the Giro Rosa, and one of the stages she absolutely poured her heart out about how difficult. Just terribly, terribly, terribly difficult it was for her to make sense of that stage. And I'd urge anyone to read it, really, because it's pure drama. It's pure human sporting drama. And Leah does not hold back on how she feels about things and what goes on during the races, particularly at the back of the pack when there's no TV cameras around. Really interesting stuff. So I'm not going to read much of it, but I'm going to read a couple of excerpts of what Leah said. This is, she'd fallen back, she'd been dropped by the pack, and she says, "The cars in the convoy were trying to encourage me to get close to their bumper to help me, but they were going so fast, and I was already full gas and couldn't go any faster. Then I started hyperventilating and crying because I was trying so hard and it wasn't enough." But Leah kept at it, and she did confess that later in the stage she held onto a vehicle after the driver encouraged her to grab on. And again, she says in this post, "Dumb idea, I crashed. Then I lost the group I'd been with because I was on the ground. I spent the next 15 to 20k chasing them down with the help of a police motorbike. Rode in the final 15 to 20k with them. Fortunately, the time cuts for the Giro are so generous, so I'm still in the race and will start again tomorrow. I just have to keep learning and keep moving forward." Nathan, I'm sure, and Shane, I'm sure you've both read the whole post. You have to feel for her, Nathan. That post was so raw.
Yeah, it sounded like a hard day on the bike. Those are really difficult to keep pushing through on too, and I applaud and completely, have a huge amount of respect for her pushing through and making it to the end, and having a hopeful look forward still too. That takes a lot when you're completely drained, and finding those little bits of hope to keep on going through and push through and keep turning the pedals is very difficult. And what am I doing? I've been in those situations plenty of times where my expectations were not met in my performance, and I'm asking myself, why am I doing this? And what am I doing? And I have a feeling those might have been a couple of the things going through, and then you push through and you find out why later. And I believe she finds those again and again and again, though.
Shane, we've talked about this privately, and I'm not going to say anything different on the podcast than I've said to you privately, which is I am a big supporter of the Zwift Academy scheme. But I do think that this post has perhaps revealed just how incredibly difficult it is to join a cycling team with none of the shared history that the other members have got and none of the shared experience. Just to finish the story on the Giro Rosa, Leah's now been pulled out, actually. She was pulled out about 2 or 3 stages after that one where she was obviously suffering so hard. Eric has said that a men's academy scheme is coming. Do you think there's going to be a need tweak it severely, or do you think there's such a huge difference between women's racing and men's racing that the tweaks might happen naturally? Do you think an experience that Leah posted that was so raw and so obviously hard for her damages the academy scheme? What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Look, that was a really emotional read. Being a racer myself, I've been in positions where I've been out the back and been no good and had no good legs. Whereas your teammates are winning stages, you're like, wow, like you're sort of questioning yourself. I really hope Zwift have in their plan, in the program, a catch net at the end of the year for a debrief, I guess assistance post this, because she's given up a lot. She gave up her job. Obviously, she's moved overseas for a long periods of time. There needs to be post-traumatic stress syndrome, I guess. You've got to watch that, because I'm serious about that as well, because if you're thrown to the deep end, you immerse yourself in something, you come back, and the last thing I'd want to see is the new Zwift Academy launched and everybody being celebrating and all the marketing of that and how great it all is, but you've got a broken soul on the side of the road who didn't make it, but tried. I mean, it's a great experience to be in it. Like, that's an amazing experience, but that's easy to say that. She's lived it. She's breathed it. She's bled. She's broken on the side of the road. It's just, I really feel for her emotionally. I just want to give her a hug at the moment. I think we all do. And that's one thing, I guess, that's the difference between marketing and real lives. I'm even emotional thinking about like where she's at the moment and how things are going for her. But I mean, she's a strong woman. It's been great to follow the year along, and it's going to be interesting to see where we go this year with both the men's and the women's academies.
There's two things I take away from this right here as learning. What's the end game and what's the proving ground? Those two things. The proving ground for qualification might need to be analyzed rather than a team camp. Maybe there's some way that Zwift can partner with some actual racing alongside the end game for the athletes that are going after the contract, and that the questions up front about the end game are very direct, and what they're after, as well as maybe some of the parameters for that.
Well, I mean, I've focused on that post because it was just so kind of grabby and eye-catching. But, I mean, there have been other posts, and particularly she's done a very reflective one, actually, after she was eventually taken out of the Giro Rosa, and there were lots and lots of positive things in there. So, I don't think we need to treat Leah as a kind of basket case or as an object of pity and sympathy, because I think she's got tons and tons and tons out of this year. But as you said, Shane, a really, really, really good point. Zwift are to some extent messing with people's lives here, and it's a hard sport. I'm sure they're learning these lessons and I'm thinking hard about how they tweak the programs to take account of these things. I just want to finish off with this. I don't know if you two guys or any listeners read cycling books. I mean, there's not a lot out there. Not all of them are good, but there are the ones that are good can be really outstanding. And I read a absolutely terrific book by Charlie Vergalius, he's now a DS actually, but he's a career domestique. And in the last chapter, he talks about one race, and I think it was the first time in his entire career that he was poised to win a stage, because he'd spent his entire career in the sport of other riders as a domestique, and through some kind of freak circumstance, he got the chance to win a stage, and he was doing that thing, talking to himself in his head, and he relates it in the book about how great it was going to be to win a stage. And then he was caught with 100 metres to go before the line after some massive long breakaway to win the first stage of his career. And he said, he summed it up in the book. I remember it very clearly. He said, cycling, it's no effing fairy tale. Never a true word spoken. Okay, let's move on, but sticking with racing. One of the best new race series to have been launched on Zwift in recent weeks has just drawn to a close. It's Zwift Masters Racing, and here's its principal, Chris O'Hearn, to tell us a little bit more about it. Welcome to the Zwiftcast to Chris O'Hearn. Chris has been on before when we talked memorably, actually, about your previous idea, Chris, which I have to say, I'm beginning to come round to now, but let's not rehearse that one again. That was that you did propose a rating system for group rides, which didn't really fly, but we appreciated the motives behind it.
You're not the only one who's had second thoughts about that, but anyway.
But anyway,
behind you now.
Yeah. Well, the reason you're on now is because you're the prime force behind another actually terrific community initiative, which is the Zwift Masters Racing Series. Now, I'm going to let you describe it and tell us all about it and give it a bit of wider coverage, which I think it really deserves. But this is basically racing for old people, isn't it, Chris?
Not quite old people. I mean, we start at 30, so anyone over 30 is welcome to join. And the key difference isn't so much the age, it's that it's not watts per kilogram based. It is age group based, but your watts per kilogram have nothing to do with it. So you enter your age category and you're racing your peers in 5-year bands from 30 through to, I think our oldest is 77, if I remember correctly.
Gosh. And I mean, that's the reason I've got you on, actually, because it's a very distinctive race series. It is, as you say, racing against your peers in age terms. What you've now, I think, just completed a full series. What have been your observations, Chris, about how that changes racing or makes this series particularly distinctive?
Yeah, I think two things sort of based on feedback from the people who've taken part. I mean, one is the fact that it's a series. A lot of people have really got into that, because they're seeing the same people every week. Rivalries develop over time. There's a points sort of series that goes on. So that makes a big difference. The other thing, obviously, is tactically in the races. So, if you've got a breakaway or you're in a group and there's somebody who's in your age group, you're looking at them and you're thinking, am I going to drop them? On the other hand, if you're in a group and there's nobody in your age category, you're thinking, great, all I've got to do is sit on here and stay with this group and I'll win my age category. So it really does change the tactics of the racing.
Yeah. No, I can see that. Where is the racing fiercest? I mean, I know you're a stats guy, so I'm sure you will have been looking at how many races you've had in each category and the kind of nature of the racing in each age band. What are your observations there?
It's been quite one thing I've been surprised by is the number of people in the older categories. So G, which is 60 plus, is one of the biggest categories in terms of registrations and numbers racing. But there's been a real mix of ability. So we've got one G racer who is probably the best out-and-out racer we've had over all of them. And, there are some pretty good racers in sort of the 40s and so on. So it really is no bar to competition, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the inaugural series has run probably over one of the quieter times in Zwift racing over the Northern Hemisphere summer. Probably a good decision on your part, because I know administratively for you this is not the easiest of tasks, is it? I mean, not only have you got registration and validation to an extent, but you've also got a relatively complex points system. Does it take up a lot of your time?
It does, actually, yeah. And certainly for the next series, which will probably start in September, we'll probably simplify the points system. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned the registration and validation, and that's a really important part. That's not going to go away. You can't automate that, but I think it's actually a really important part of the Master Series, that it isn't just turn up, tell us you're 50 or whatever. People have to register online. It's not hard, but there's an online form to fill in, and then send a copy of their an ID. Like, we ask a race license is perfect, but if not, I've had passports, driver's license. I've even had a pension statement. So they send it.
Well, that's a very appropriate form of validation for masters racing.
Indeed. Yeah. And we've, validate that. And I mean, it's not, obviously I still can't be 100%, but I think the fact that people have to go through that process also helps eliminate what we might nicely call sort of your casual cheater or casual doper or whatever you call it.
Yeah. Age doper.
Yeah. I mean, there's easier ways to win races than having to register and send an email and that sort of stuff. So I think it actually makes the series pretty clean as well.
Obviously, it sounds like you're going to continue. I expect you're probably going to see much larger fields as well. I mean, if people were thinking of taking part in this Masters series, what do you think is the single most appealing reason for joining this race series rather than any of the many others on Zwift?
I think it's the tactics, really. It's just a completely different way of racing, that you have to race against the people who are in your age group. It's not just an out and out who's the strongest. It really adds another sort of level. It's sort of several dimensions to the racing.
Excellent. Okay, well, it's another terrific community initiative. I sadly have not yet managed to pluck up the courage to enter, but I definitely will be in the Zwift peak season. But I've noticed that there's a real buzz about it. So thanks, Chris, for everything you've done to further the cause of Zwift racing even more. If people want a really simple place to go to find out more about Masters racing, what do they do?
There's a Zwift Masters Facebook page. That's probably the best place to start.
Excellent. Well done with it, Chris. Look forward to continued success, and thanks for coming on to talk about it.
Cheers.
Shane, characterised this series actually by massive support and kind of affection and friendliness from everybody who's taken part. I don't know whether that's a characteristic of Masters racing. I always thought Masters racing was more cutthroat and vicious than ordinary racing.
It can be, for sure. But no, I love it. I do support Masters racing, and I have in real life as well. Ever since I turned 30, I raced the Masters 1 category across a lot of disciplines and into Masters 2. It just gives people a little bit more of a chance to be, I guess, the star of their own little group for a while, compete against their peers. You'll always have outliers as well. So there's going to be people who are very, very quick, but it just gives people a chance to compete in their own little environment, in their own little tribe of age group, I guess. So, no, I'm all for it. And I really love what Chris has set up.
Yeah. No, he's done a really good job on that, Chris, actually. There's a really nice atmosphere around that series as well. If you look at the social media around it, there's a really terrific kind of supportive and friendly and welcoming atmosphere around it. And really interesting, Nathan, to say that so many racers in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I think it's extremely... which is interesting. It's been an extremely attractive platform for, it seems like, around that age group for a lot of different reasons. I think safety time, as well as having the ability to jump on with a high-end setup. What I also see around the organizers that were a precursor to the Masters is that I see ZHR as a tag in there. And you say it's a very happy group and a group that really gets along well and has nothing but a lot of positivity around it. And I think Zwift handicap racing, which is all about creating a handicap amongst all of the racers so that everybody's kind of evened out, so that everyone's racing around the same level. That's what ZHR was all about, has caused a much stronger camaraderie around the racing, and everybody just kind of there for the experience of pushing each other. I think that might have some of the influences that the organizers are really doing a good job in caring for the interests of the competitors.
Yeah. And the competitors have got a part to play themselves. I mean, if you enter a race series, and I think Chris stressed the point series here, I think that brings a bit of a greater responsibility, actually, because you're committing to doing something week after week, and you're probably committing to racing with the same people. So I think that helps to generate this slightly more positive atmosphere around racing than you can, what should we say, sometimes see elsewhere.
Well, there's also another series going on, though, just to maybe reflect off, where there's a little bit of tensions going on, though, too, where there's other, so that's, there.
Be specific.
Maybe,
be specific, Nathan.
Be specific. There was a long conversation on my personal stream the other day between me and a few Australians on the eCrit series, and some of the, there's things on the line there that are going on, and people are being a little bit vocal about maybe why do we have people from other countries involved, or why, or other kind, whatever it might be, because there's something on the line in a series of coming back over and over again. So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've seen quite a lot of kind of Z-Power trash talk around that series as well. And Shane Von has reported that it's not a completely happy ship around the women's bit of that series either. There does seem to have been a bit of tension around this. I mean, it's your part of the forest, Shane. What's going on?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I'm a big part of women's cycling, or big part of women's, big supporter. Actually, being a supporter is being part of cycling, yeah, for women's cycling. So Von races quite a bit. She's raced outdoors a lot for a national team as well. Now she's racing a bit indoors, and she's part of the eCrit series. She was really pumped for it, and it gives her a reason to get on the bike and go hard every week. And unfortunately, the points aren't being tallied up. So she's done probably 6 or 7 races now, and she's sitting on 0 points. So there's something up there. I've raised it a few times, but I think I'm not loud enough. So I might have to scream a little harder. But we definitely need that, because there was a post up there as well saying that, look, a lady from Queensland who I know as well, she said, look, I did one race, but I didn't, wasn't part of the series, and it didn't add up my points, so I won't be coming back. And that's the last thing we need. That's the worst possible scenario. We've gotten someone in racing, enjoying the race, but then there was no end game. There was no result of the race itself, so there was no reason for her to come back and do it, which it kills me. So hopefully we can get that sorted. And I guess at the end of the day, what we need to do is make sure that what's being delivered is what was promised at the start. We're not asking for anything more. We're not asking for any changes in the system. We're just asking for what was promised at the start to be delivered throughout the series.
Absolutely fair point. And even more so with the series, actually, because with the one-off race, and okay, there's some mess up on the results, you can think, oh, well, okay, it was fine, I had a good workout. But if you committed to the series, and particularly you've done 2 or 3 races and you think, well, the results might come in and I am building points up, and then they don't happen. I can see how that could be demoralising and pretty destructive for the series and participation, actually. So that it's a bit worrying to hear that. Let's hope if somebody hears this, then maybe something that can be done about it. And in fact, somebody did hear it, and I'm updating the Zwiftcast right now to reflect that. Glenn Knight, an old friend of the Zwiftcast actually, and Mr. Results on Zwift, got in touch to say that they are aware of the issue with the ladies' points and they're working hard to solve it. They hope to have a solution very soon. Our ladies should continue to race, and when they have the issues sorted out, the points will be updated to reflect past races, so don't stop racing. He goes on to tell us that there's actually no way to prevent other riders from other countries other than Australia entering, but at the beginning of the series it was said that only Australian riders would gain points, and that's still the case. This series is run by KISS and follows KISS rules, so any rider over 3.99 watts per kilo does have to have a heart rate monitor, a reliable power source, and that's a smart trainer or a power meter to qualify for points. Again, Glenn says they can't prevent riders from entering the race who don't have those things, but they won't be included in the results. So thanks for getting in touch with that, Glenn. Really glad to clarify it. And the message is, keep racing. You won't be losing your points.
Right on!
Okay, let's move on to the latest in my series of interviews with Zwift insiders. This is one of the guys who actually creates Zwift. He's a 3D artist. And what that means is he actually draws our worlds. So let's hear from him.
My name is Tony Uragas, and I am a lead 3D artist.
What's your background? Where were you before Zwift?
Before Zwift, I was at a game company. I was a character artist. What I did there was just from concept to finish, creating characters and then doing the 3D models, painting the texture for them, rigging them, and animating them as well.
How long approximately does it take to create a mile of new road in Watopia, let's say?
Well, we can create road relatively easy with the tools that we have. A mile, probably not that long, maybe a day. We can make a mile of road a day.
Okay, so if a mile of road only takes a day, and I'm asking this in very simplistic terms because I know you're going to explain how terribly complex it is, why don't we get loads of new pavement all the time?
Create a mile of road is easy, but decorating around it, creating the environment that road lives on, that takes time. Building the assets, plants, animals, buildings, the terrain, sculpting terrain around it, it takes quite a bit of time because everything is done by hand.
Do you think the kind of fantasy island setting of Watopia is more appropriate to the game or more engaging for the users than the should we say, slightly less visually exciting execution of something like Richmond?
I like both. I like that Watopia is our own island that we can throw a volcano in or throw a mountain range in. It's our own place. It's kind of like the best of. So I think Watopia has a lot to offer there. But I also think that the real world courses offer its own unique set of enticement, I guess. I like them both. If I had to work on one, Watopia is more exciting because lava, right? Get to make lava. But the cities are unique too. You can make buses, bridges, stuff like that. Yeah. It's kind of nice to try to replicate real world courses.
Do you approve of rain?
I do like the rain. I like the moodiness that it brings. Maybe we might look at how often it rains, but I think it's a nice change up. The rain came because of London, but we put it in Watopia as a test, and it kind of brings out this broodiness that's nice every now and then.
Do you think there's scope for kind of more weather in Watopia or any of the worlds?
I think there is. I think the further we go on, the more we develop, I think we can add more effects. Maybe leaves blowing in the wind or dust storm. I think somebody threw out tornado earlier this morning. That would be nuts, right?
I've asked everybody this because, the community is such a big part of what Zwift is. Do you take account of what the community says?
Yeah, of course. I mean, always. It's almost daily. You look online and you see kind of what people are talking about, what the temperature of the water is, especially after you just release something. Like you want to see what people think, right? There's that initial wave of excitement, like new stuff. It's not just a product, it's us. Like we're putting ourselves into this, spending hours in this world. Like it's a part of us. So, taking the good with the bad, it definitely has an effect with both negative feedback and positive feedback.
Do you think that the look of the Zwift worlds as we see them now, is there going to be a big step change ever, or is it now just a question of refining and finessing and making the worlds we've got now as good as they possibly can be?
I don't think that there would be a huge change at the moment, like going from the look we have now to Minecraft or anything like that. I don't think that there will be that big of a change. I think it's more along the lines of adding, optimizing, and refining the look that we have.
I mean, some of us remember Jarvis, and if you look in the deeper reaches of the web, you can still see Jarvis. And we often get conflicting reports from different people as to whether it is ever possible to have Jarvis return. Do you have an answer on that?
The ideas come up from our users, and we throw the idea around every now and then. I'm not exactly sure if it will happen. I can't say either or. Anything is possible. We can do anything in Zwift.
Okay, well, that is interesting because we have heard before, I don't know how good the source is, but we have heard before that Jarvis, has been consigned to a place where it could never be brought back from. Are you saying that's not quite the case?
Well, I'm not the one that would make that decision, I guess is what I can say. But it would be exciting to bring Jarvis back.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Very, very interesting. Thank you very much. Chaps, we have talked about this before, and I don't know whether we bore people banging on about this because it probably affects about 3% of people who currently Zwift. But I couldn't resist the raising the prospect of will we ever see the return of Jarvis. I mean, and he didn't rule it out, interestingly enough. Nathan, is this just silly nostalgia for old timers, or is there really, a thing here that it will be nice to see Jarvis back?
I think that little conversation we had earlier about shorter rides being really popular on Zwift, and just the ability to jump on a really short course is, I think it'd be a popular place to ride, actually. It's a cool little kicker followed by a downhill. I really enjoyed that process of seeing how close other people were continually, like this little crit course. And once we get to the place where we're able to select multiple courses when we have, the overpopulation starts to come up. And I think that's actually already been on the minds of maybe some Ed Zwift that, okay, we need to start opening up more courses. I think it'd be a cool option. Now, John straight up told me that Jarvis itself in its original rendition is not possible to bring back. Because of the way that the world itself was live, that it was a completely different way of expressing graphics on a screen, in its nuts and bolts. Now, whether or not they can, now it sounded like their ability to create a mile of road and then maybe put the artwork that they already have done in some way or form of old Jarvis would be very quick. And so I think what he was getting at was that, well, yeah, we could recreate Jarvis pretty quickly. It just couldn't be in the form or the way that it was. They can't, it's just not loadable from somewhere very like, oh, here you go. We have Jarvis stored up in a background somewhere.
Yeah. They can't just press the Jarvis button, but bringing,
I was wondering about that. Like, John, why don't you just press, that's kind of like how I said it to him. Why aren't we pressing the Jarvis button? And he was like, Jarvis was a totally different way of writing up code. It was really interesting how he told me that it was done.
Well, I can confirm that I tried to load Jarvis on a very, very old install about a year ago that I had, and it hadn't been updated. So I'm like, okay, I know how to load Zwift without it auto-updating. I did that. People were writing all over the screen, and my elevation count to the Tron bike got reset to 0. So there's no going back.
Right, serves you right. Well, it just proves time travel, no good thing can come of time travel, either forwards or backwards. Normally we'd be having an installment of what's become our regular coaching feature with Kevin Poulton right now, but actually I'm going to have to hold this over because we pretty much have run out of time. Too much chat, fellas, but I'll definitely resurrect Kevin for the next episode. So time to say goodbye. Shane, what's diverting you in coming days?
Oh, look, everything's happening at the moment. As mentioned before, I've done the Flux Round 3 video. I've got the Dorrito, the corn chip trainer. I've been doing some planking on a Wahoo desk. Look, it's all happening. I am at 24/7 on this game from now through to Eurobike, because as soon as we hit Eurobike, there's going to be a whole range of things to cover and to talk about and to think about and to discuss behind the scenes, because there's just so much going on. There is just so much. So my YouTube channel is going flat out, but this things are busy. Things are really busy, and it's great.
Yeah, good to hear. Good to hear that. Nathan, how about you?
There's a ton going on in the background. We're really excited about Zwift Academy and things that are coming down the line for live broadcasting around that. We've been hammering for months now on getting the group workouts, live workouts settled and who we're going to have on that. And it looks to be launching really, really soon. I'll be in Long Beach actually next week over at ZHQ for some stuff to get that going. There's so much coming down the line. I think we're all kind of working on a little bit of a web show thing that we're looking to launch in the next 2 weeks.
We should commit to a launch down this, because we've been talking about it for ages, particularly on the podcast actually. But the three of us are going to be involved in something a bit more streamy and webby and video-y, and so look out for that. It's definitely coming, isn't it, Nathan? Definitely.
Yes, it definitely is. We are going to go live and talk about things together. That is going to happen. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of planning going on in the background with that. It's full on. So Zwift Community Live is all cylinders firing for sure.
Good to hear. Well, for the next 2 weeks, you'll mainly find me slumped in front of a television watching young men ride around the French countryside. Although I am actually just popping out to Girona next week for a very short visit, happily on the Tour de France rest day actually, to grab a bit of content for the Zwiftcast, which I'll talk to people about when it's ready to go. As ever, fellas, thank you very, very much indeed for your time. Great to hear you. Great to get that kind of global perspective on what's happening with the tour in your respective countries. I think that's one of the benefits of talking on a regular basis to people in other parts of the world. Very interesting to hear it. I hope listeners agree. Thanks very much indeed. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, Shane. Talk to you next time.
Cheers, boys.
The Zwiftcast is proud to be an official community partner of Zwift. So what does that mean to you as a listener? It means that while Zwift provides support for us to try to make the highest quality content we can, they also guarantee our editorial independence, which basically means they don't interfere with what we say or how we say it. Thanks to Zwift for that, and thank you for listening. See you next time.